Dr. James, people have suggested, analysts in particular, that the DA needs to state clearly what it stands for as opposed to just opposing the ANC. Do you think there's a point to be made about that, about what the DA stands for as opposed to just over and over again opposing what the ANC is doing?
Well, what we've done over the last year is in fact go to South Africans with an offer. Because we do believe that we have now matured to becoming a party in government, and therefore we need to make an offer to the voters that defines who we are and what we stand for, in contrast to being an anti-ANC party. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are times when we want to be opposed to the ANC on the basis of policy measures, but we certainly don't see ourselves as a general anti-ANC party. So, and the offer is the following. In the first place, we produced a growth and jobs plan. We released at the end of July. And we presented to the voters our economic policies. Mm-hmm. And the philosophy behind our economic policies essentially is that we believe in a market-oriented economy. Clearly, there's a role for government in that to create a conducive environment. But it's essentially a market-oriented economy.
Sure.
And our principal concern is about jobs. South Africans, as you know, given our unemployment rate and so on. So we offer a strategy and a plan for how we will create jobs, how we would improve education in order to get jobs, growth going. And as a general approach, we say that what we need to do is grow our economy in the longer term at 8%. So that's the one offer. And then the other offer, in philosophical terms, firstly, is a very strong belief in the rule of law and judicial independence. Secondly, I've already mentioned the market-oriented economy. Thirdly, a commitment to redress, especially with regards to land and housing in urban areas and rural areas, and reconciliation, because we really need to have real reconciliation policies put in place, not simply street renaming, but much deeper. And finally, I believe in having an independent and professional civil service that can deliver services to people.
Sure, maybe exactly that's where the problem is when it comes to the DA, because all of these things that you've just given us now, the ANC can claim all of them, actually, can say, well, that's exactly what we're offering. And therefore, it makes it difficult for the DA to distinguish itself from the ANC other than by coming across as effectively anti-ANC.
Well, I disagree. I mean, our commitment to a market-based economy is not the same as the ANC. The ANC believes in state capitalism, and it's a very different approach.
Isn't that a new discussion, really, within the ANC, the involvement of the state? That's a pretty new discussion that's just happened over the past months. But generally, if you look at what has happened over the past 15, 16 years, market economy.
No, that's not true. I mean, it's a fairly clear blue waters between how the ANC approaches the role of government in the economy and our approach to the role of government in the economy, and how it is you want to release energy. So that's quite different. Mm-hmm. When it comes to redress and reconciliation, the ANC, approaches those two things in a similar way philosophically, but in terms of its practice, it hasn't done very much. A lot was done in the 90s with President Mandela's administration, certainly. But since then, very little has been done in practice. Cadre deployment is completely, in principle and in practice, fundamentally different to saying that a civil service must be independent and it must be professional. Mm-hmm. What the ANC has done is placed all of its people, regardless of competence, in most cases, in certain areas, in the civil service, and has compromised the effectiveness of the civil service. And because you do that, potholes start appearing. So, and that's a very different approach to our approach.
All right. And you're going to hear people from the Western Cape who say that when the DA took over the Western Cape, they employed their own people in certain strategic positions.
No, there were political appointments in certain offices at fairly high levels on the basis of competence, certainly, but where people agreed with the overall direction of the party, but nothing
Dr.
beyond
James,
that.
The argument is going to be when the ANC does it, it's not professional, but when the DA does it, it's professional.
Yeah, partly that's true, but the ANC goes much deeper than that. We don't have cadre deployment. What we do is, one can look at very specific examples, but there are individuals appointed on the basis of competence in limited areas so that there is some kind of policy coordination.
Let me go back to some of the discussions, and I'm going to bring you in, Ralph, in a minute. Some of the discussions that took place at the Congress itself, if I may, Dr. James, starting with the issue that was raised by Masizole Mnqasela, the issue of the deputy to Helen Zille. Is that issue completely off the table, and is there a reason why it's completely off the table?
Well, the issues off the table in terms of being able to have a Congress resolution on it, because clearly it's a Congress decision, and the next time we can decide these things would be in 3 years' time. It's possible to do it in between at a federal council level. But the reason why we believe it is not a good idea is that our existing positions can involve much more work. My own position should be raised up to a much higher level of work, and my 3 deputies, for example, I can imagine that we can work much harder because as the party grows, there is room for more work. It's a belief that you don't create a position of deputy leader when it has no content.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the image, though, that people may have. And it's been said out there that perhaps the fact that there's only Helen and she's the leader of the party makes it look like a one-woman party.
Well, you only have one leader, and so parties with 2 leaders just don't work. So you have a single leader and you have unity of purpose around that leader. But then leadership itself cascades through the entire party. There's myself as federal chairperson. There's 3 deputy leaders. There's James self as chairperson of the Federal Council. Then you have 9 provincial leaders, so it's 1 per province. And then you have leaders at a local government level. So there is a growing number of and constant expansion of leadership capacity. And then we have a young leaders program, and we have a system of grooming younger people into positions. And so I believe that as the party grows, which it is presently, we need to expand our leadership, but on the basis of real work. You see it growing organically. You can see where the need is. You define the job, right, and then you advertise and you fill that job. Okay.
Let me bring in Ralph. A number of issues have come through. The issue of leadership within the DA, and the issue of what it offers South Africans, perhaps as an alternative to the ANC. What are your thoughts on those matters?
Kolani, when I look at at what the DA offers, it is very difficult to establish what is so distinct about the DA as a political party compared to the ANC, or maybe even compared to other opposition parties in South Africa. And I think that the success that the DA has had in the past few years, receiving what you could say disgruntled voters from the ANC, even if that number is still on the margins, has given the party an illusion that it offers something very distinct, that some kind of a political identity that people could want to identify with. When I look at this party, I think the best that the DA has come up with, the way in which it has packaged itself, it continues to package itself as a technically competent political party, some kind of a company, a SWAT team that you bring in where there is a problem in local government, a SWAT team that you bring in where there is a problem of lapse when it comes to accountability in government. And as you correctly stated, those things that the DA talks about, such as the upholding the rule of law, upholding the constitution, those are things that each and every South African believe in. And also the ANC and other opposition parties, they believe in the same vision. The only problem is that the ANC cannot live up to that to some extent. There's been criticism that the party has challenges when it comes to living up to accountability and all that.
But you talk about the SWAT team when there are problems at local government and so on. Isn't that what South Africans want now, given some of the problems that we report about day in and day out in terms of governance?
At this point, it will certainly drive a certain amount of voters to the DA. But the question that I often ask myself is it sustainable? Has the DA been able to package itself as a political home? Because the way in which it has been gaining voters from from the ANC, for example, it's I would not actually say it has been gaining. I would say the ANC has been losing voters. The ANC has been getting out of its way through the problems that they are having in local government, losing voters, and the DA has been accepting those voters. I cannot point to an instance where I could say the DA has launched a political campaign that you would say will lure voters who are almost comfortable in another party, where voters will think that it looks like we've got a better deal on the DA side.
But why is it that in your view the DA is unable to come up with that strategy? And I'm going to ask Dr. James to respond.
Because it requires a vision. It requires something beyond the technicalities. While the party gains now through the question of technicalities and the malfunction at local government, the situation just favors the party now. But the party will soon reach a ceiling, in a sense that this movement and also other political parties are taking a hit as to how the DA is gaining.
So you're suggesting that it doesn't have a vision, even though it has elected the kind of leaders that it did over the weekend, including the 3 deputies to Dr. James?
The situation that is confronted with on the ground has driven the party to be more lax. They are confusing the technicalities of running government with vision. And also the question of other opposition parties. The reason why you have the DA continuing to receive, you could say, a significant number of disgruntled voters from the ANC is because other opposition parties such as COPE, are not strong. And actually, I believe that the greatest threat to DA's growth is not necessarily the ANC maybe becoming much stronger. The greatest threat is the opposition parties. The DA has not competed for the vote across the opposition parties.
Just a quick response for me, Dr. James, if you may.
Well, let me just say 2 things. You know, it's not technicalities when you speak about the quality of delivery, because my colleague is right in saying that we package ourselves as a party that can deliver, and that's a very important thing, because delivery of quality services to people is fundamental to their existence. But it's not, the technical competence is there, and he's quite right to point that out. But it's about governance. It's about how you govern on a local level, provincial level, and then obviously at a national level. That makes the difference. What we have done is say that the quality of service delivery at the municipal level requires a competent, independent, and committed set of well-qualified people to run it, and that turns a municipality around. But what's also required is some level of policy coordination, and so appointments have been made in order to make sure that our policies are actually implemented. It's very limited. It's not widespread. We don't create civil service jobs to fill the ranks simply with party loyalists. These changes are to allow for competence and policy coordination, and I'm quite satisfied with that we've done the right thing.